Hello, and welcome to The Way to Wow, Business Lessons from the Military. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel. And for those of you who have joined me for the last couple of weeks, we are here every Tuesday morning on the West Coast, 10:30 a.m., and afternoon on the East Coast, 1:30 p.m., and an hour in for Central and Mountain Time. So I guess we're straddling, each side of the day here, morning and afternoon. And our purpose for this half-hour program is to talk about military doctrine, military history, great leaders in military, from the military, and how we can take what they used and apply it to our professional lives, either running a business or perhaps as we direct our careers. And so hence the name, Business Lessons from the Military. And I invite you to go to our YouTube channel and you can see previous shows there, because for the last 2 weeks, we've been talking about Objective 1 from Marine Corps Warfighting Doctrine. And I feel compelled to mention this each time. I do not think business is warfare. Having said that, many of the lessons from how the Marine Corps looks at warfighting can be translated into how we would pursue, or how we do pursue, a successful business. And so that's the process that I'm working through. And I'm going to jump right into things. Sharing my screen here. Okay, here we go. And oops, wait a minute. Hold on 1 second here. I realize I got the slide starting on the wrong thing. And what are we doing here? Okay, let's cancel this. Scintillating television here, right? There we go. Okay. And one more click. It's always so much. There we go. So The Way to Wow, Business Lessons from the Military. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel. Going to move the window that shows me here, so you think I'm actually looking at you through, the magic of. So we used to say through the magic of television. Now we say through the magic of Zoom. By the way, before I forget to mention it, if you would like to join me live, you are welcome to do so. He says as he realizes he did not close his partition here. There we go. See, now you can see my Navy. One of the gifts I got from some shipmates in the Navy. Now you know why I'm talking about business lessons from the military. So, as I like to do, all of the shows that I produce and or host relate to this system called the 3 pillars of attainment. It's how we look at life in a holistic way. And my shows tend to focus on finances. However, the concepts redound into the self pillar and the relationships pillar, into many of these other realms. And so as we talk about them, I from time to time make comments about these other realms. Okay, and just a quick review. So 2 weeks ago, we talked about the first 2 fundamentals of warfare. And those were unity of effort and concentration of power, which I translated into resources from a business perspective. And I invite you to check those shows out to get more on that. And from there, we went to initiative and agility. And by the way, you'll notice that these pairs tend to work together. Okay, so concentration of power supports unity of effort. And initiative, being able to take the initiative in business, requires that we act with agility. Okay, if we're too sclerotic about how we pursue our business, we're not going to be able to take initiative. And in today's much more rapidly changing business environment, again, even if we're working for a company, we need to be able to adjust to changes quickly. So if you look at what's going on right now in the banking world with the takeover of Silicon Valley Bank by the FDIC and the fall of Signature One, One Republic, I guess, has been having some problems I haven't read anything specifically on that, but I see them in the news. And a number of community banks have seen their stocks hit pretty hard, right? So what does, we have to be able to be agile to take initiative in dealing with those issues. And indeed, many companies, I think, were one of the reasons why SVB was taken over is companies were looking at their stability or lack thereof, and they took initiative by withdrawing their money, right? And there was a run on the bank, basically. And those companies that were less agile got stuck, right? So now they're going to have to deal with the aftermath of that. Okay, so today we're going to talk about two more factors, two more fundamentals, and those are maintaining freedom of action and sustainment. And just like the first two pairs, sustainment is what supports maintaining freedom of action. And by the way, you'll notice maintaining freedom of action is what gives us the ability to be agile, to therefore take the initiative. If we don't have freedom of action, if we've constrained ourselves somehow, we can't be agile, we can't take initiative, okay? And it foots all the way back. I don't know what this is doing here. It foots all the way back to then we can't concentrate our resources, and so then we no longer have unity of effort. So each one of these builds on the previous ones. All right, so let's talk about this idea of maintaining freedom of action. So at any given time, presumably we are directing our business in a particular way. So we may have certain objectives we're trying to achieve, and we've created plans in order to gain those objectives, in order to achieve those objectives. Okay. However, it's dangerous, or we'll call it a bad policy. I don't want to sort of get too hyperbolic about this, but it's bad policy to get so ingrained in a particular course of action that we cannot change. Okay, I was talking with a friend last night, and we were discussing, among other things, what was happening in the United States back in the 1970s, when it looked like the Japanese auto industry was going to just clobber the American auto industry. And one of the problems was the American auto industry had so committed to a particular direction. All the big companies did. GM, Ford, Chrysler, I think American Motors was a separate company at that time. They were all so, I use that term, sclerotic. It's a medical term, right? It's hardening of the arteries, basically. They could not shift. And along came the Japanese, who had much more agile way of pursuing the automobile business. And they just started cleaning the clocks of the US automakers. And because the US automakers had so constrained themselves, they had no freedom of action. Okay. Now, part of that had to do with how they had negotiated their union contracts. And so it was very difficult for them to redeploy labor to make changes. Okay. And that was a problem. But also it was the thinking of management. Management they'd been so used to being the top dogs in the automobile business throughout the world that they only saw one way to do it. They had blinders on. Okay. And so when they got hit with serious competition, they had no freedom of action because they just could not see how it could be done any other way. Okay. And one of the key aspects of Marine Corps warfighting is, although they will have a plan, okay, their plans follow the dictum, I should say, of von Moltke. He was a famous German general at the end of the 19th century, and he said, no plan survives first contact with the enemy, right? And what he meant was, you make all these plans and you make contingencies in the plans, and then you go for it knowing that once you actually get into combat, you're going to have to be flexible, because it's that freedom of action that in the end will win the battle, win the victory. Okay, I was watching with my daughter, The Longest Day. So on Turner Classic Movies right now, they're doing the 31 Days of Oscars, and they play a lot of the great movies from the classic period of Hollywood. The Longest Day is about D-Day, the D-Day invasion, the Normandy invasion, I should call it. And one of the reasons why the Allies were successful is because the way Hitler had set up the German army, most of the major decisions had to go through him. So as the Americans and the British and the Canadians and the French, the Free French and the other allied nations are storming the beaches of Normandy, and the Germans needed their backup panzer division, their backup tank divisions or army divisions, really, in order to push the Allies back into the English Channel. They needed Hitler's okay to release those panzer reserves, and Hitler was asleep, and no one would wake him up. Right? They had no freedom of action, and in the end, that was the key to the Allies gaining that foothold in Normandy that eventually led them to victory in the European theater of World War II. And indeed, in general, the Allies, as a matter of warfighting doctrine, fought a much more freedom of action style of warfare that allowed them to beat not just the Germans and the Italians and their allies in Europe, but also the Japanese in the Pacific, right? So I've mentioned this before. In the Marine Corps, there's this idea of what they call the strategic corporal, and what they mean by that is decision making is pushed down to the lowest possible level, and that's part of maintaining this freedom of action. So if the rifle team there, right in the midst of the battle, sees that whatever the plan was is not going to be successful, they have the flexibility to adjust as long as they keep the higher echelons informed. Okay, and they're expected to take that initiative. And the whole structure of the Marine Corps is one where higher echelons are helping maintain the freedom of action of the lower echelons, so that in battle, they stand the greatest chance of success. Okay, so as we talk about this idea of maintaining freedom of action, I made a couple of notes here. I just want to make sure I cover these. So one characteristic of being able to maintain freedom of action is having the logistical support in order to make changes. Okay, so the same is true in business. Even in a business that isn't a manufacturing business, we need logistical support. It may be office support or administrative support, I should say. It may be technological support. Okay, all of the things that your business or your company needs in order for your people to be successful needs to be able to be used as much as possible in a flexible manner, so that if the direction needs to be changed, your people have the freedom of action to do that. Okay, and that includes the process for making the decision to change action, to change how they're attacking a problem. Okay, if everything has to be, if you're the CEO of your company and everything has to be run through you, well, what happens when you're not available? Evidently, progress toward your objectives stops. Okay, that's now the people you work with, your team doesn't have freedom of action, and so you're not going to make progress. Okay, so again, just as I've spoken about in previous lessons, here one of the primary challenges of being the leaders in a business is to see to it that the people who you're working with have the support, have the supplies, have the various things that they need, so that if there does need to be a change in direction, they're able to do so. Okay. Now, another key element of maintaining freedom of action is as much as possible to anticipate what the developments are going to be, i.e., if we pursue this particular strategy, okay, or we use these particular tactics, what do we anticipate as being the results of that strategy, those tactics? Okay, rarely is there only one possible resort or result. I mean, not resort, one possible result. Okay, so one of the sort of operational principles that General Patton used that made him so successful was he always was planning 2 or 3 steps ahead of wherever his army was, so that they could just keep rolling and keep rolling and keep rolling. And the speed at which they operated overwhelmed the enemy, so that even when his army hit a roadblock, they were already looking for they had already looked for, I should say, ways to get around the roadblock, get over the roadblock, whatever. That advanced planning was crucial to Patton's success as an army commander. Okay, so when his forces were bogged down in Sicily, he had already found a way across, the I believe it was a river. I think it was in Sicily. And one of his battalions is looking for a way across, and they got the maps, all this stuff, and he's already on the other side. Like, how did you get there, sir? And he said, I went down there and got across, right? So, and that was part of his genius as a commander, is he was always looking ahead. What are the potential obstacles? How can we overcome those obstacles? How do I, as the top dog, how can I make sure that my team, my army, can overcome these obstacles? And what are they likely to be? How do we overcome them? Okay, so that's another issue, is to, as much as possible, figure out what are the unanticipated developments that hence become anticipated, okay, and therefore how can we solve them? Finally, in order to maintain freedom of action, we need to be on the lookout for the enemy. Now, of course, again, in business, we don't have an enemy in the sense of someone who's trying to, shoot us or mow us down or with machine guns or anything like that. Not at all. However, we do have competitors, and those competitors are trying to grab as much market share as they can, typically at our expense, if when we're in the same business, right? So we need to be as aware as possible of who are our competitors, okay? What are they doing? What are their resources? How are they likely to respond to what we do, right? So if we're a fast food business, let's say Jack in the Box, right? And we decide we're going to have a new product. Maybe it's some kind of Mexican food. Okay, it may be terrific, but we're not operating in a vacuum. What is Taco Bell going to do if we release a new Mexican food product and it's very popular? What is Chipotle going to do? What is Del Taco going to do if they're still around? So what are our competitors likely to do in response to whatever action we take? Because we need to have in order to maintain freedom of action, we need to not underestimate and think, well, they're not going to do anything. We're just going to roll right over them. No, that's not the case. Even as much as General Patton pursued this active, aggressive posture, he also knew that at some point the enemy was going to stand and fight. And in order for him to maintain freedom of action, he had to be prepared for that. How did he respond to the enemy so that he didn't underestimate what they would do? How are we in business going to respond to our competitors? Okay, so that we don't underestimate them, but we're prepared to meet them based on whatever they come back at us with. Okay, all of those are components of maintaining freedom of action. Okay, so let's shift now to sustainment. So in order to maintain freedom of action, we need to have sustainment. Now, sustainment basically comes down to recognizing who am I supporting and who is supporting me. Okay? So we call it the supporting and the supported. And it's not a matter of I'm only one or the other. Typically, everybody is both with respect to other parts of the organization. Okay? So if we're looking at an army, okay, we think of let's look at transportation, the group who maintains the vehicles and drives the vehicles and such. Okay, they get personnel up to where the fighting needs to happen. So they are supporting, let's call it the platoon, and the platoon is the supported in that situation. Do you see that? Okay, transportation, getting people where they need to go, they're supporting the platoon, the supported, where they need to go. Okay, but the platoon may be supporting, let's say, an artillery battalion, or not artillery, an artillery, I can't think of what the smallest grouping of artillery is, but an artillery unit to make sure that they're not surprised by the enemy. Okay, so now this platoon that was the supported is now the supporting. So they're supported while they're on the trucks, and then the trucks drop them off and they disperse around the artillery unit. And now all of a sudden they're the supporting to make sure that the artillery can keep firing and don't get caught from behind and wiped out. And therefore they're not able to. So now the artillery is the supported based on the platoon that's protecting them, but the artillery now is supporting maybe another part of the battalion that is the spearhead of the action forward. So you see how these things work in concert. Okay, so the same thing happens in business. Okay, if you're senior management in the business, you may look at yourselves, we may look at ourselves as, well, we're the supported, everybody else is working for us. While that's true in terms of we're setting the strategic objectives, we are also the supporting in making sure that our team has what they need in order to support us in meeting those objectives. So it's a somewhat circular relationship. So when it comes to what we were just talking about, freedom of action, logistics, and supplies, we may be the supporting in making sure that the resources are there. We're the supporting with respect to the supply people in our business, because we got to make sure the money is there for them to buy the supplies that they need. Okay, so we're the supporting with respect to supply, who are the supported in getting what's needed. But then supply is the supporting with respect to the people in the company who are sort of on the front lines of the business, making the business happen on a day-to-day basis. So those people, the frontline people in your business, now they're the supported and supply is the supporting. So we have the same kind of relationship in a business that we do in a warfighting unit, whether it's the Marine Corps, whether it's the Army, whatever. I could give you examples from the Navy, from the Air Force, the Coast Guard, everybody. Okay, so that supporting relationship is very important to keep in mind as we look at our business and how effective can we be in achieving our objectives by maintaining freedom of action, which will allow us to get around the obstacles that are for sure going to come up. It's never a smooth path to meeting our objectives, not in war and not in business. That's not in life in general, right? And I think we're coming up on time here. Yeah, we sure are. So again, I want to just repeat this one more time. In sustainment, we have the supported and the supporting, but they can change places depending on what part of our business we're dealing with. And that is the support for maintaining freedom of action, so that especially our frontline people, whether it's our sales people, our customer service people, our R&D people, they all have needs in order to pursue their part of meeting our mission, of meeting their objectives that relate to meeting the overall mission. Okay? And so that supporting relationship is there. And we need to make sure they have the logistics, that they are working to anticipate unanticipated developments, that they're working on making sure they're not underestimating the competition, so that they can maintain freedom of action and be most efficient in meeting, in pursuing the mission of our organization, of our company. So that's what I've got for you today. And next week, we'll deal with the last 3 fundamentals of warfighting translated into business from Marine Corps doctrine, warfighting doctrine, objective number 1. Okay. And we'll wrap it up there, and then we'll move on, and we'll go into other subjects. We'll go more deeply into some subjects, and we'll continue on with this discussion so we can see how can we make our businesses as successful as possible? How can we make the companies we work for as successful as possible? So thank you very much for watching. Again, this is the Way to Wow show, business lessons from the military. I'm going to go ahead and stop the screen sharing here. And we are here every Tuesday, 10:30 a.m. Pacific, 1:30 p.m. Eastern, an hour in for the Central and Mountain Time. Tomorrow is my other show, The Way to Wow, People Making Money. And my guest is going to be Norm Mitchell of Primerica, and he's going to talk about being in the financial services business. So I invite you to join me when I talk to Norm. And that is at 12:30 p.m. Pacific time, 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. Again, an hour in for Central and Mountain. And we're every Wednesday, the Way to Wow show, People Making Money at the times I just mentioned. Please, if you haven't visited it yet, go check out our YouTube channel. Okay, it's YouTube/The Way to Wow. And you can look at many other episodes, including interviews with successful people like us, not the Elon Musks of the world. I mean, whatever, he's obviously very successful, but most of us are not going to be Elon Musk. But we can be more successful than we are, however we define that. And that's what we talk about. And that's really the point of the shows that I do. So thank you very much for joining me. I wish you a great rest of the day, and wrapping up my show as I always do for my dear, dear friend, Marie, darling, you are and ever will be my Belle. Thanks so much. Hope to see you tomorrow.